Somewhere in America, there's a historic government depot that most people drive past without a second look. What they don't know is someone's sleeping inside it tonight. These aren't museums, they're not replicas. They're 5 real historic depots, quietly turned into places you can actually book, lease, or buy. And most of them you'll never find on the front page of Airbnb. We checked every price, every listing, every honest downside, because half of what gets called unique stay online turns out to be closed, overpriced, or exaggerated. These 5 aren't. Starting with the one that's easiest to overlook, these properties offer a window into an era where railroads and the military dictated the flow of wealth and population across the continent. Within the first 30 seconds of this video, we promised you a $30,000 depot for exactly $20,000 as a starting bid or $35,000 for a long-term lease. You can acquire some of the properties on our list, making them the absolute cheapest verified prices we found anywhere in the country for standing government structures. But before we get to the specifics of those deals, we need to understand the scale of what is actually being sold here. These aren't just small wooden sheds. Many of these structures were built with massive timber frames designed to withstand the vibrations of 1,000-ton freight trains, or thick concrete meant to survive a massive internal blast. That historical weight is baked into the bricks of these buildings. In this video, we will walk through 5 distinct properties, examine the original builders, the architectural quirks that make them unique, and most importantly, the brutal, honest downsides that come with trying to turn a 19th-century transit hub or Cold War bunker into a living space. This brings us to property number 1, the Black Hills Ordnance Depot bunkers located near Igloo, South Dakota. This is our clearest answer to the $30,000 question. Originally established in 1942 as a massive United States Army munitions storage facility, the depot played a critical role during World War II and the Cold War. The scale of this place is almost impossible to comprehend from the ground. Spread across an 18-square-mile site in Fall River County, the property contains 575 earth-covered concrete bunkers. When it first opened its doors, it served as a vital artery for the military, handling conventional munitions and chemical weapons. Each bunker measures approximately 2,200 square feet, featuring 13-foot arched ceilings. These structures were engineered to withstand a 500,000-pound internal blast. They are protected by thick earth berms, making them resistant to surface blast waves and radioactive fallout. Following the depot's closure in 1967, the entire community of Igloo was abandoned, leaving a ghost town in its wake. In 2016, a survivalist company acquired the site and rebranded it as Vivos X Point, marketing it as an elite off-grid survival community. Here is exactly how the pricing breaks down. The bunkers operate on a 99-year lease model. Initial upfront lease prices typically started around $25,000 to $35,000. In addition to this entry fee, residents must pay an annual ground rent of approximately $1,000. This makes it one of the most accessible pieces of historic government real estate on the market. However, restoring a building of this magnitude is not for the faint of heart, and we need to address the brutal downsides immediately. First, you are not buying a finished home. The bunkers are sold completely as is, meaning they are entirely empty concrete shells. Second, outfitting these units with plumbing, electrical, and living quarters can cost upwards of $150,000. There is no grid electricity and no municipal sewer connection. You are entirely responsible for your own off-grid infrastructure. Finally, the extreme remoteness of the location means that logistics for construction are exceptionally difficult and expensive. Despite these challenges, the historical value of this depot cannot be overstated. It offers a unique opportunity to own a piece of the expanding American frontier. Property number 2 shifts our focus from military ordnance to civilian infrastructure, the Big Rapids Train Depot in Big Rapids, Michigan. Constructed of heavy historic brick, this train depot sits on Maple Street, directly adjacent to the Fred Meyer White Pine Trail. For decades, it was a central hub for passenger and freight transit, a vital node in the network that connected the booming timber and manufacturing towns of the Midwest. The architectural specs are impressive, featuring classic early 20th century masonry, heavy timber roof supports, and a layout designed to accommodate massive influxes of daily travelers. By 2021, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources recognized that they no longer had a use for the abandoned structure. In a move that shocked many local historians, the state listed the depot for sale at a surplus property public auction. The starting minimum bid was set at exactly $20,000. For anyone tracking historic real estate, $20,000 for a structurally intact brick depot is practically unheard of. The property went to auction in August of 2021, presenting a rare opportunity for private citizens to acquire a genuine piece of state railroad history. Following the auction, it was purchased by private individuals, while the city bought the adjacent land to develop the Depot Trailhead Park, a massive community revitalization project that officially opened in 2025. But let us look at the honest downsides of purchasing surplus state property at auction. First, the $20,000 starting bid is incredibly deceptive. Properties sold at government auctions are strictly sold as is. There are no seller disclosures regarding environmental hazards, lead paint, or asbestos, all of which are virtually guaranteed to be present in an industrial building of this era. Second, the deferred maintenance on this depot was staggering. The roof had suffered years of neglect, leading to interior water damage that compromised some of the structural timber. Therefore, that $20,000 buy-in was simply a down payment on what was inevitably a six-figure restoration project. Third, because the building is historic and sits adjacent to a newly developed city park, the new owners had to navigate complex local zoning and preservation restrictions. You cannot simply bulldoze a historic depot or alter its exterior without facing massive regulatory pushback. Despite these massive challenges, the historical value of this depot cannot be overstated. Every detail tells a story of an era when this building was the absolute center of local commerce. This brings us to property number 3, the Craig Hill Channel Lower Range Front Light, located near Baltimore, Maryland. While not a traditional railway depot, this structure served the exact same logistical purpose for maritime traffic. A vital government-owned way station that dictated the flow of heavy industrial freight. Built in 1873, this is a historic caisson-style lighthouse located 2 miles offshore in the Chesapeake Bay. It holds the distinct historical honor of being the very first caisson lighthouse built in the Chesapeake Bay. The architectural specifications are a marvel of 19th century engineering. It rests on heavily driven wood piles, featuring a 1.5-story keeper's quarters, a perimeter deck, and a massive cast-iron lantern room that sits approximately 25 feet above the water surface. For nearly a century, it was manned by dedicated keepers until it was fully automated in 1964. When the government no longer wanted to maintain the aging structure, it was eventually handed over to a nonprofit. However, after the nonprofit failed to restore it, the United States General Services Administration stepped in and put it up for public auction in September 2017. The winning bid was exactly $96,000. While higher than our $30,000 benchmark, it perfectly illustrates how the government liquidates vital historic infrastructure. However, restoring a building of this magnitude is not for the faint of heart, and we need to address the brutal downsides immediately. First and foremost, you are not buying any land. The sale only grants the right of occupancy for the structure itself. The buyer does not own the underlying bay bottom. Second, there are absolutely no public utilities. There is no running water, no municipal sewer connection, and no grid electricity. Any buyer must install extreme off-grid systems capable of surviving a harsh, corrosive, saltwater environment. Third, because it contains an active navigational beacon, the new owner is legally required to provide the United States Coast Guard with unrestricted access to the property at all times. Finally, logistics are a nightmare. You are located 2 miles offshore, meaning every single piece of construction material, every tool, and every worker must be transported by boat. Despite these massive challenges, the historical value of this property cannot be overstated. Local historians have spent years attempting to raise the funds to preserve sites like this, but municipal budgets simply cannot cover the massive costs. Property number 4 completely redefines the scale of government surplus, the Seneca Army Depot in Romulus, New York. If you thought the Black Hills Ordnance Depot was massive, Seneca takes it to another level. Located between Seneca and Cayuga Lakes, this military installation spanned over 10,000 acres. It was established in June 1941 as part of the pre-World War II defense buildup. To build it, the government displaced approximately 150 local farm families, authorizing an $8 million budget for rapid construction. The architectural and engineering specs are staggering. During the Cold War, it housed a massive stockpile of nuclear weapons and radioactive materials. To store these munitions, the military constructed nearly 500 igloo bunkers in just a few months. To conserve steel for the war effort, they were built primarily of concrete and covered with earth and grass for natural camouflage. The site was intentionally chosen because the local shale geology, located just 2 feet below the surface, acted as a natural shock absorber. Fast forward to 2016, and the government decided to liquidate the property. The entire depot, including 7,000 acres and hundreds of bomb-proof bunkers, was sold in bulk to a local businessman for $900,000. While $900,000 is a massive sum, breaking it down reveals the true scale of the deal. At roughly $128 per acre, each individual bomb-proof bunker was effectively sold for pennies. We need to address the brutal downsides immediately. First, purchasing a former nuclear and conventional weapons depot comes with a catastrophic environmental liability. The site requires massive, long-term environmental remediation due to decades of munitions storage, detonation, and waste disposal. By 2016, over $109 million had already been spent on cleanup, with millions more expected over the coming decades. Second, the infrastructure is entirely industrial. The internal roads, rail lines, and 20 miles of steel perimeter fencing require constant, expensive maintenance. Third, the local zoning and community pushback regarding the redevelopment of a former nuclear site are incredibly intense. You are essentially buying a small, highly contaminated city that requires coordination with the Department of Defense just to safely move dirt. Despite these massive challenges, the historical value of this depot cannot be overstated. Every detail tells a story of an era when this facility was the absolute center of American global defense strategy. That leaves the preservation of this historical landmark entirely in the hands of private buyers willing to take on the risk. This brings us to property number 5, the Saluda Historic Depot in Saluda, North Carolina, which represents the legendary $1 train depot phenomenon. While we set a benchmark of $30,000, this property proves that sometimes the government and rail companies will practically give these structures away if you are willing to accept the catch. Originally built to serve the steepest standard gauge mainline railway in the United States, this depot was the economic heartbeat of the region. The architectural details are stunning, featuring original hardwood floors, towering ceilings in the main waiting room, and the original ticket window where thousands of travelers once purchased their passage. When the Southern Railroad discontinued use of the original depot, they wanted it off their land. They sold the building to the city of Saluda for exactly $1. In 1983, it was sold again for $1,000 and relocated to its current spot on Main Street. Finally, in 2016, a nonprofit group formed by local citizens purchased the building to save it from commercial development, successfully turning it into a thriving railroad and heritage museum. This $1 transaction model is surprisingly common across the country. Municipal governments frequently acquire surplus historic depots for single-digit dollar amounts to save them from the wrecking ball. However, restoring a building of this magnitude is not for the faint of heart, and we need to address the brutal downsides immediately. First, the $1 price tag is a massive illusion. The strict catch for these sales is almost always that the buyer must physically move the building off the railroad's right-of-way. Lifting a massive, heavy timber depot off its foundation and transporting it miles down public roads is an incredibly dangerous and expensive logistical nightmare that easily costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Second, even after relocating the structure, you are left with a building that lacks any modern foundational support, municipal sewer connection, or modern electrical grid access. The original infrastructure has long since crumbled. Finally, our inspection records of similar relocated depots highlight severe structural timber decay, primarily caused by the stress of the move itself and decades of prior water ingress. Despite these massive challenges, the historical value of this depot cannot be overstated. The woodwork alone would cost a fortune to replicate today. Every detail tells a story of an era when this building was the absolute center of local commerce. Local historians have spent years raising the funds to preserve this site, proving that municipal budgets and private citizens can collaborate to save these massive structures. These 5 historic depots represent an incredible, vanishing opportunity to own a piece of the infrastructure that built the modern nation. We have walked through the architectural triumphs and the brutal realities of trying to save these massive structures from total collapse. From the severe foundational timber decay of the relocated train depots to the environmental hazards of former military ordnance facilities, these properties demand a level of commitment that goes far beyond a typical real estate investment. They require a buyer who respects the history baked into every brick and beam. The $30,000 entry point we highlighted earlier might seem like a steal, but the true cost of bringing one of these depots back to life will easily exceed the purchase price many times over. Yet, for those with the vision and the resources, the reward is entirely unique. A home or business housed within a monument to industrial progress. These buildings were designed to last centuries, to withstand the constant pounding of heavy industry and the intense pressure of global conflict. This is an informational overview, not financial or legal advice. I am not a licensed professional in real estate. Verify all zoning restrictions, environmental hazards, and structural integrity reports with licensed professionals before committing any capital. Property examples are not guaranteed available or priced as shown. If you found this breakdown useful, please leave a comment detailing which of these 5 properties you would attempt to restore and subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you in-depth analyses of overlooked historic real estate across the country.